Welcome to the channel. In this video we will know about Ranga vs Holy Knights. This video may contain events from upcoming anime, so watch out. Subscribe the channel for more web novel chapters. So, now let's start the video. Ranga was running through the battlefield. His body was light as if it were a feather. The sensation of being upon the earth gradually began to fade, and before he knew it, his body was already running in the sky. Naturally, the acquisition of the skill Soaring Run was a skill that could only be acquired by one who belonged to some of the highest ranks of magical beast. However, such things were no more than trifling matters to Ranga now. The wave of strength he now exuded gave him a certain feeling of delight. His body was now overflowing with power, as if his very energy was pulsating. His limbs, now covered with a jet black fur, now had golden lightning pulsing through them. Demonic energy was seeping out like an electrical discharge. A large golden horn now grew on his forehead. On the left and right was the unchanged jet black horns from his earlier form. The golden horn in the center was releasing rays of crystallized energy, pure energy it gave off continuously. As he gave off the dignity of a king. A majestic beast of noble presence that demanded the respect of his domain. The jet black fur, that covered his majestic body, was clad in lightning. The deep black color, akin to darkness itself, was clad in a near-divine radiance that fluttered delicately in the wind. However, in contrast to the gentle visage he possessed, the speed that he achieved while soaring in the sky had long since passed the speed of sound. But, only within Ranga's surroundings, the airspace retained its utter calmness as if nothing could disturb it. A space-based barrier that he used consciously. As Ranga vigorously soared through the sky, he caught sight of a group of holy knights positioned below him. Using Thought Link, he had already confirmed that there was no one else currently headed to that direction. Making a sharp nosedive, all the while killing his great momentum, he made his rapid advance towards the Holy Knights group. The Holy Knights squad commander Fritz steadily made progress on the necessary preparations. All according to Lady Hinata's plan. So far, there was not a single error in her judgment. There was nothing suspicious and, therefore, no problems whenever she took the lead. This time was no different. Although, he was still taking precautions, since it was never a bad idea to be cautious. It's only a group of monsters. Even though these same monsters had proclaimed themselves to be a country, there was no need to take this as a major event. This was Fritz's opinion on the matter. However, Hinata had no use for the opinion of someone only at his level. It was only something natural to follow and make Lady Hinata's opinion his own, as she was someone that he adored. It was for that reason that he made the various preparations, so that as soon as the signal from the other groups came through, his group would also be able to immediately begin. It was possible to invoke the barrier at any time. Then disaster itself came crashing from the sky. Fritz had never neglected his guard. He felt that the need for such an excessive strategy was exaggerating the threat of the situation, but he was still faithful and trusted Lady Hinata's orders. For this reason alone, it can be safely said that he and his companions were brimming to the rim with self-confidence. Not a single one of his companions were neglectful or slacked in their duties. Despite all of this, a single black lump came crashing from the sky to blow away one of his companions, a mighty holy knight. Even with that, there was no reason to be careless. This instantaneous event that sent a holy knight flying was not cause for panic. The proof for this reasoning was that the holy knight who had been blown away was still certainly alive. Of course, it would be a whole other story if he weren't, but since he was still alive, there was no need for excessive thoughts. Fritz gave his first order like lightning and took actions to carry it out. They had already erected the anti-magic barrier that covered not only every direction in the sky, but also underground, so they were sure their safety was certain. It was a standard defensive plan in case of surprise attack, to sense and defend against magical attacks. Furthermore, they also had set up the spirit barrier, a complex network of barriers that held multiple functions such as regulating temperatures or detoxifying airborne toxins. Holding faithfully on the standard plan of actions taught by Lady Hinata herself, Fritz had the outermost barriers established to detect the enemy so they would be able to conduct counterattacks immediately in the chance of a surprise attack. But this was all in vain, for the enemy's attack this time was simply too fast. When the barrier perceived the attack and sent the warning about the encroaching monster, a holy knight had already been blown away. The extent of the barrier was nearly 2 kilometers from their position. To think that something could reach them before they had enough time to react was unthinkable. The purpose was to be able to detect the danger and react with long-distance attacks to weaken the target. This was standard procedure. Certainly, it won't react if an ally were to pass through it or touch it. Only when a monster that wasn't recognized by the barrier's settings. But it was certain that this monster had passed through these high-classed barriers. The evidence of such was due to the very moment it arrived. At that very moment of its arrival, that monster had carelessly crashed into the outermost barriers, and in that instant, all of those high-classed barriers were obliterated. There were some that had hypothesized that if there was enough energy involved, there was nothing that could pass through or resist a barrier. It was because these barriers were spread out at this very moment, that the holy knight that was attacked was spared near certain death. This was what emphasized the point that barriers aren't useless things. However, to be capable of breaking through several barriers, no, obliterating them instantly. Besides using a spirit armament, there was simply nothing that should be capable of doing such a thing. The monster that had suddenly crash-landed, using a holy knight as his landing pad, had begun walking calmly and advanced to the holy knight it had blown away. Fritz's eyes opened widely as his gaze locked onto the monster in his presence. All he could do was to wait for an opening. His aim was to wait for the right opportunity to rescue his companion somehow. However, this large, black wolf emitted such a terrifying density of coercion. Fritz couldn't find any opening at all. This was the same monster that cleared 2 kilometers faster than a holy knight could react to. This same monster was now within mere meters of them. Its limbs were clad with golden lightning and possessed a magnificent horn that none of them had ever seen before. A holy knight who was equipped with spirit arms and was cloaked in their spiritual power from the beginning, and surrounded with various barriers, had been incapacitated from just one hit. Just the mentioning of this alone could be called a terrific, yet horrifying action. Fritz wanted to reject it from his core, but he had to come to the conclusion that the monster in his presence was an obvious, disaster-class monster. Now it is no longer a situation to be concerned about fallen companions. A single mistake would surely end with the entire group's complete annihilation. All hands, battle formation. Abandon the barrier. Strike it with your full power. Like this, Fritz shouted out his battle order with frightening precision. Lady Hinata's prediction once again was proven to be completely accurate. When he made this realization, even in a situation that could be called a crisis, he felt a certain joy. As expected from Lady Hinata-sama, she had predicted this situation from the beginning. On Fritz's face sprouted a small smile, of course without neglecting his guard towards the might monster in his presence. Like this, he continued to instruct the battle formation using eye movements and minor gestures. A skilled holy knight, without overlooking a single gesture, were capable of promptly assuming the battle formation to exterminate a demon. The members of Fritz's group immediately regained their composure with the help of one of the party's magic, thought acceleration. As they rapidly made out their battle preparations, they continued to observe the target before them. But then something unthinkable broke the tension of the battle. What are you doing? Quickly now, go and heal that injured person. Ranga, using its forelimb, the demon wolf tossed the blown-away holy knight over to their formation. For a moment, Fritz's composure was confused. He had already made his resolve to abandon injured or slain companions, but this monster had just given the wounded holy knight right to them instead of finishing him off. It was an action that Fritz couldn't understand. Oi, quickly now, if you don't do something pretty quick, he might die, you know. Ranga, the demon wolf, clad in majestic golden lightning, seemed to have concern for his companion's life for some reason and had uttered these words. His deep, baritone voice was very frightening. Vice Commander Rama requires treatment, everyone else, follow me. Fritz quickly returned to reality and let out his voice to give orders to the other group members. Kicking the ground in order to force his body, that was still confused, into action. Even though he had no idea as to what the aim of this terrifying monster was, he could at least fight without worry. Putting all of his strength into his elemental sword, spirit sword, he offered his prayer to the divine spirit. The energy in the atmosphere began to wrap around the sword blade and the sword itself began to radiate with light. Wrapped in the spirit's ambiance, the whole sword began to emit a pale light. I don't know what you're trying to do, but don't you dare underestimate us, you monster. Eat this, dispersal sword. A non-holy knight, I offer you my prayer, please seize the enemy with your divine might. Earth jail, great gravity prison, oh the blazing flame prison, burn my enemy into nothingness. Hell fire, blazing prison sphere, oh, chilling ice and snow, clad my enemy in your mighty snowstorm and freeze them. Icy blizzard, O blowing wind that passes through all things, become my blade. Wind blade, wind cutter, the other vice commander, Gerard, held his breath as he watched the simultaneous attacks of the other holy knights. He stood back to protect and aid his recovering companion. While filled with the resolve to not become a hindrance, he continued to observe the demon wolf situation. It was then that he was astonished beyond his capability for reason. The demon wolf, before his own 2 eyes, had received all of the attacks, all the while wagging its tail happily. That's it for this video. Subscribe the channel for more web novel chapters. Meet you on next video.